good afternoon to all, or depends on the time zone. So hello to everyone. I'm going to present our paper now. I'm going to share the screen. Is it visible for everybody? Okay. So the paper is, the title of the paper is A Dynamic Model for Balancing Values. It's a joint work by myself, Juliano Maranhao, representing the University of São Paulo Law School, the Center for AI at the University of São Paulo, and the Logarithm Institute. And also Edelcio Gonçalves de Souza, a co-author, a colleague at the University of São Paulo and Logarithm, and Giovanni Sartor from the University of Bologna and the European University Institute. Our goal, our short-run goal in this paper is to model reasoning with rules and values. There is an apparent consensus that applying the law is not limited to applying rules, but also to apply rules in consideration of underlying values. There are at least three ways in which rules and values are interconnected in legal adjudication and legal reasoning. The first one is that values are a critical framework for assessing the merits of positive laws. That is, values are used as an assessment to the extent to which the rules meet some standards of justice and fairness, and therefore this may affect the validity of rules. There are different legal theories to approach what is the particular relation between law and morality and with respect to the validity of rules. The second way that values are relevant in the application of rules is it regards interpretation. So in interpretation, when the interpreter selects alternative meanings to legal terms, it considers underlying values and teleology, that is, the extent to which the rule, the meaning which is ascribed to the rule, better promotes or demotes relevant values of the community. And the third way in which values and rules are interrelated is regards the proportionality reasoning in constitutional and human rights assessment. That is, if there is an infringement of constitutional right, this infringement is assessed with respect to advantages regarding other constitutional rights and fundamental rights and values, and it's assessed if there is a better trade-off in this conflict between constitutional values. So also here there is a choice between the underlying morality, public policies, or fundamental rights, which are relevant for the application of rules. So since these values are also relevant for interpretation, the long-run goal of this research is to contribute for the tenet of making the law computable, given that to providing logical models to represent law in a computable way. So this research is connected with, is a continuum with respect to previous research. The first one presented at ICAIU 2017, where we discussed a logical architecture for dynamic of legal interpretation. We were concerned with the interplay between changing rules and changing meaning ascription and changing values which are underlying those rules. Then in the 2018, a paper with Edelcio Souza about the contraction of constitutional and constitutive and regulative rules. And then Maranhao and Sartor in ICAIU 2019, we assessed how the balance of values may affect and change legal rules. And in Dion 2020, a paper with Sarto called Interpretive Normative Systems, we assessed different legal theories regarding the relation between law and morality. As a running example to our model, we have used the Riley versus California case judged by the US Supreme Court in 2014. According to the law at the time, police officers were permitted to access the content of any item found with the arrestee in an arrest. And then a new question was raised by this case, which was, is it permitted to access also the digital content of the arrestee's mobile phone? And the answer by the Supreme Court at this time was no, that is, the police must obtain warrant to search cell phones. And this was based on a consideration of underlying values. Specifically, it was argued that in this case, there is a significant impact on the privacy of the arrestee if the digital content of the mobile phone is accessed. So in the balance of values regarding safety and privacy, in this case, privacy would outweigh safety, and therefore it should be forbidden to access this particular property item of the arrestee. So we would like to model it, and in particular to understand how is this balance between competing values and how they affect legal interpretation. But we are going to focus on arguments about values which are demoted against values which are promoted by the action at stake. I'm not going into the details of the formalism.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm not going to the details of the formalism, but I'm trying to show how the model works using the example given by Ryle versus California. So the whole game here in this model is to compare those values which are demoted against the values which are promoted by the action at stake, given a certain constellation of factors. So we divide the values which are relevant within those which are demoted and those which are promoted, and use an impact function to assess whether the action impacts the demotion or the promotion of a given value, and also use factors that may intensify or attenuate the impact of such values. So the idea is that we compare the proportional impact on values with the proportional and aggregate impact on the promoted values. And if the demoted values beat the promoted values, then we have a reason to forbid the action at stake. Otherwise, we have a reason, if the promoted values are stronger than the demoted values, then we have, or equal to the demoted values, we have a reason to permit the action given that constellation of factors. And so there is also a connection with argumentation with this approach, since we know that the argument bringing values which are relevant and has some hierarchy within the field of underlying values to rules, and then arguing that actions may impact those values, are arguments to the fact that there is a reason to forbid a certain action, or there is a reason to permit this action. So we want to also to bring this argumentative dimension, but we model it by means of change functions. So let me give an example of the additive model that we have used. We have await functions taking values to the interval of real numbers 0 to 1, and they are going to represent dimensions of relative importance of these values and a hierarchy between the values at stake. And then an impact functions that take factors and values and represent the impact, an impact function for each action, and it represents the impact of the action in the value, and actually the influence that factors may have on the impact of the action on such values. And this impact may be positive. This influence of the factors on the impact of the action on values may be positive, or it may be negative. If it is positive, we call the factor an intensifier. And if it's negative, we call the factor attenuator. Of course, one may argue that there is some arbitrary choice between the interval of real numbers that we assign to weight of functions and to impact of factors or of actions on the values. But actually, this is just a model to try to represent reasoning with dimensions of and magnitudes. So any scale may be used to represent these impacts. It can be an interval of 3 points, for instance, low, medium, and high. It could be of 5 points, low, medium, high, and high, and so on and so forth. It depends on each model of representation that one would like to use. But the fact is that there is a rationality using this dimension, and that's what we want to capture. So here in the example, if we consider the impact of the action on a certain value, we call it a baseline impact if there is no factors to be considered. So in this case, in the Rilo versus California case, we are concerned with the impact of the action of accessing an item which is found with the RST. So accessing any item has a baseline impact of 0.4 on privacy, and privacy has some weight. The proportional impact is the product of the impact and the weight of the value. So here we have, in a baseline situation where there is no factor considered, we know that we have that the privacy, the impact on privacy of the action of accessing outweighs the impact on safety, since there is no charge against the individual. Then the result is that the demotion of values is stronger than the promotion, so the action is forbidden to access. But we may consider intensifier factors. For instance, the factor that there is an arrest intensify the impacts on safety by the action of accessing. And therefore, if you consider the product with the relative importance of safety, we will have that the balance shifts, now making the action permitted in the case of an arrest. And if we move now for a consideration of property rights, the factor that there is a property now on the demotion of property rights, but it's not sufficient yet to beat the promoted values, and therefore it is still permitted to access the items if there is an arrest and it's a property item. However, if we consider a mobile phone, then this is another intensifiers that intensify, as the Supreme Court said, significantly the impact on privacy. And this makes that the aggregate impacts on the demoted values becomes stronger than the aggregate impacts on the promoted values, which means that if there is an arrest, it is a property item, but it is a mobile phone, then the balance says that there is a reason to forbid the action of accessing the digital content of this mobile phone. But factors may have an attenuating influence on the impact of action on values. For instance, if we consider that the mobile phone is not a personal one, but is a professional one where only professional content is allowed, then this would attenuate the impact on privacy and may shift the balance again for an authorization to access the content if the mobile phone is not personal. So that's how the game is played within the additive model. But our main concern and contribution in this paper was to describe how the shifts of balance occur if we add factors, or if we contract factors, or if we add values, or if we contract, delete values from the model to be considered. And this may reflect argumentation so that there is a factor to the fact that there is a factor that was not considered, or to the fact that there is a factor that actually is not present, and therefore this will change and shift the resulting deontic status of the action at stake. So the goal was then to describe balance shifts by changing either the set of factors or by changing the set of values. If in this game we are concerned about who's going to win, is it going to be the demoted values or the promoted values in the balance? So if we consider a situation where the demoted values beats the promoted values, it makes the action forbidden, and we want to know now how this balance may be shifted. There are two ways, basically, in which this value may be shifted by the addition of new factors. It may be a strengthening of the opponent, that is, a strengthening of the promoted values, and we may strengthen the opponent by adding intensifying factors to it. We called it a factor rebutting expansion function. Rebutting because it looks like a rebutting in structural argumentation, since we're going to come with a new opponent to the argument and strengthen the opponent. So for factor rebutting expansion function, you add factors which intensify the impact of the action on the promoted values. But it may be an undercutting if we weaken the winner. And we do that by adding attenuating factors. Now, we also may shift the balance by contraction, by deleting some factors. So if we delete factors which attenuate the impact of the action on the promoted values, we have a factor rebutting contraction function, because we are deleting attenuators of the opponent. So we make the opponent stronger. But we may also delete intensifiers of the winner. So we may weaken the winner. This would be the case of a factor undercutting contraction function. So let me show how this could work in the example. Suppose we have this previous argument position, and then we have as values promoted privacy, and values demoted privacy and promoted safety. And now we are going to add a new factor by a rebutting expansion function. This new factor increased the strength of the promoted values, and therefore it beated the previous argument position where the action was forbidden because the demoted values were stronger than the promoted values. Now we add that is the context of an arrest, and therefore this will activate the value of safety, and therefore it shifts the balance to a permission of the leading to a permission of the action in the context of an arrest. Now, to represent a contraction, let us suppose then that we have this as our previous position, and we delete the arrest and safety. So we had before that the promotion of values beated the motion of values, making the action permitted. But now, if we delete the arrest and say that the arrest was invalid or that there was not an arrest as an argument, this will shift again the balance, making thus the action forbidden. And this would be an undercutting contraction function, since it weakens the winner by deleting an intensifier. Now, suppose we have this as an original argument position, where we have that the action is forbidden because it's an arrest of a property item, in particular of a mobile phone, and we have that the aggregate impact of the values demoted are stronger than the values promoted. Now, if we expand the set of factors by the factor that is not a personal item, this will attenuate the aggregate impact on the demotion of values, weakening the demotion of values and making it weaker than the promotion of safety. This will then have an effect of shifting the balance, and since it is an addition of an attenuator on the winner side, we call it an undercutting expansion function. Now, if we consider this as the original position, and we want to delete the factor in question, then we would have that the attenuating factor of the opponent is deleted, and therefore this is a factor rebutting contraction function that shifts again the balance. I think we are ahead of the time. So with respect to with respect to the shifting of balance, we may also have the shift concerning the set of values. If we add values or if we contract or delete values, this may also lead to a shift of the balance, changing the reasons for a prohibition to reasons for a permission. This shift may be caused by a value rebutting expansion function. And what is that? If you add values promoted by the influence of intensifying factors. So if you strengthen the opponent by adding values, but you may also weaken the winner by adding values. And this will be a value undercutting expansion function. We may also have the effect of shifting balance if we use a value rebutting contraction function that is to delete an attenuating factor from, to delete a value which is promoted by the influence of an attenuating factor, or otherwise, if we have a value undercutting contraction function, if we delete values that are demoted by the influence of intensifying factors. So let me give, just to finish, an example of adding a value. Suppose we have this as an original position, and in this position, the promotion of safety beats the demotion of property rights. But then if we add into consideration the value of privacy, and we know that there is a baseline impact on privacy, then this will shift the balance by expanding the set of demoted values by making them, since you strengthen the opponent, this is a value rebutting expansion function. And you may have an undercutting contraction function when you delete the corresponding value. And so on and so forth. These are the moves that may be described. In the paper, we have made a formal description of these functions in an AGM style. And the idea then is now to raise your interest to the paper by showing how it works in the model, but we didn't enter into the technical details. If you would like to know these technical details and the construction of these functions, please visit our paper in the proceedings. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Juliano, thank you very much for your paper, your presentation. Now, I would like to pose a question from the audience. Mr. Rafael Saravalli has the following question to your paper. How could this model proposed by you represent analog reasoning?
Well, it is possible to represent analogy in this model. For instance, if you have, let us see that it's forbidden to, sexual abuse is forbidden, but it is permitted in the case of a pregnancy which is a resultant. Sorry. Let us take an example of abortion. So it's forbidden to provoke abortion. But if this is the case of sexual abuse, then it's permitted to perform the abortion. Then this is the case because it impacts, in this case, present this fact, there is an impact in woman dignities that outweighs the life of fetus. So we may use an analogy in this model by saying, for instance, that the case of an encephalic fetus is analog to the case of sexual abuse, because carrying the pregnancy in this case means significant suffering for the pregnant. So in this case, if you consider that this factor is an analog with respect to the impact on values, then we would expect to have the same solution by saying that it is permitted in this case to perform an abortion. So we may use analogies by saying if this factor is similar with respect to impact on a similar value, then the solution should be the same. So it's possible to accommodate analogical reasoning within this model.
Thank you very much, Professor Juliano. Now you have the floor for 1 minute for final words.
No, just like to invite you again to read the paper, and we still are investigating this issue. One of our goals is in future work to explore situations where we compare different actions, because this model is applying to one action at a time. So all the functions are indexed to a particularly given action, but now we would like to compare different actions in terms of their impact on aggregate impact on values. So thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Roberto. There are 3 very interesting questions. One from Mikal. Mikal asks about generalizability of the influence of factors on the promotion or demotion of values, and whether we could have the same function across legal cases and domains. Trevor Benchkapon asks about the shift of the balance by changing the weight of values. And we have a third question about comparing independent actions. I think that all these questions are related, and they are very good ones. First, related to Trevor Bench-Capel's question. Yes, it's possible to shift the balance by changing the weight of the values. And in the paper, Value Assessment and Revision in Legal Interpretation, we have used a function for that. That paper is co-authored with Giovanni Sartor. And indeed, there is disagreement about the relative importance of values, as well as there may be disagreement about the influence of a factor on the impact of the action on a value. So we may also have divergences and shifts in the ascription of impact according to this function. And actually, in our model, the contribution of each factor for the impact of the action on the value never changes, independently of the addition of any further factor. And this is something that we want to deal with in future work by making the contribution of each factor change according to the addition of new factors. It should be probably a multiplicative model and not an additive one. But this is left for future work. And the question about changing or comparing independent actions is a very good one. And this is a tenet that we want to explore in future works. Actually, both functions, the impact function is indexed for each action. So in our model, it's not possible to compare different actions. But in order to do that, probably, as Mikhail has pointed out, we would have to generalize the function so that across a legal domain or across legal cases, so that we can compare different actions. For instance, in consumer law, you may want to compare alternatives for satisfying a consumer complaint, either by indemnization when there is a problem with a product, or by delivering a new product. These are different actions, and we would like to compare them. So this is all left for future work. And again, for Mikhail, we use, when we index the functions to a particular action, we are talking about local coherence. And it is probably the lowest level of local coherence. The coherence is very tight. We may want to broaden this coherence level, but we believe in local coherence. We will not generalize to the extent that we have a hierarchy of weights of values or impacts of actions, considering the whole global order, the whole legal order. But we think about smaller domains of coherence, for instance, maybe a field of law, or maybe the extent of a case or a certain issue. We may organize it not only by cases, but also by issues, where we have different degrees of local coherence. But we don't believe in a global coherence of the legal system, because the assignments will be too arbitrary. So I think these all three are very good questions, and they are all related to future investigations that we want to pursue. And so thank you very much for the questions. And I'm now moving for the gather town. For if you have more questions, please, I will be there to discuss our work. And Roberto, if you could explain then again how to go to the gather town, I will be waiting for you there.